Good morning, everybody. Sorry, I got started about a minute late. Good morning, good morning. Alright, so before I jump into Day Trading Spy, there's a ton of little plays that I'm looking at. So we're going to be looking at a bunch of those really quick. So now that this piece deal is basically going to be going through, um, this kind of changes the outlook of the market currently. And the outlook was prior to, this whole war starting, conflict starting, was that precious metals were gaining, treasury yields were pulling down, oil prices obviously were pulling down, and a lot of our equities were doing pretty good. We were seeing a cycle out of tech, large push into semiconductors. That's been largely the same, except we've seen a lot of that tech regain. But that means that I want to be shorting a lot of oil. It also means that I want to get some drip calls for, um, this new 5,000 starting portfolio. Um, so I want to get some drip positions going. I do want to short WTI. Ideally, I was going to be taking the 4 puts, but it's looking like I might have to jump into the 3 puts. So I will have to change that watch list, but I have the 4 puts currently right here. They're going to be way higher than the 0.41. But we'll see what price they're at because I might jump into some of those. Now I'm looking at a bunch of little symbols as well today. And I don't mean little, some of these are, the top companies in the world. But potentially wanting to go long on Apple. I have the 302.5 calls for June 26th on a watch list. So might be taking some of these. Not entirely sure yet. Amazon, I have the 260 calls watch listed for July 17th. They're definitely going to be a lot higher than what they are currently. But we'll see the price on those at open. Now, I was looking to take the 65 calls on CenX, but this morning we did have a little bit of weird price action. We pulled all the way to the 65, almost the 66, which would be, far above the strike that we're looking for because I have the 65 calls set up, but that pulled down to 58. So potentially it's still in that major buying range, but I just want to be a little cautious about that because potentially we could see it form this inverse cup. But if it doesn't pull down, then we have this extremely solid bullish cup with potentially the handle forming to the upside. So I really do like these calls. There doesn't show any data on them currently, but they are for this week, June 18th. So that would be, quite a move to the upside, but I do think that potentially that could be, very, viable. Looking at DraftKings, I'm wanting to take puts on this. Basically, the puts that I have on the watch list are the 25 strike puts. So that would just be simply shorting down to the middle Bollinger on the daily time frame. The drip calls, I'm still going to be looking at the 5 straight calls for September. Those are the ones I have on my main portfolio. So I just want to add a few of those on the new portfolio. Now, a lot of these energy companies are wanting to break out, okay? Um, like FLNC, Fluence Energy. I have the 32 strike calls on a watch list for June 17th, or July 17th, excuse me. So that'd give us a month. But that's looking super solid. That would take that strike right in there, and that would still be giving us the full rest of the cup to the upside. So that would definitely run in the money if, we're going to continue seeing the price action that I'm expecting. Same thing with First Solar, FSLR. So we do have this very well formed cup and handle. The calls I'm looking at on FSLR are the June 18th 320 calls. Might seem like it's, you know, unreasonable to get there, but I do think that the market's trying to essentially fair value gap this entire selling. Um, Basically, the selling was caused by bad news. Bad news is over, so very likely the market's trying to buy this entire range up, and we're seeing that within the SPY, we're seeing that within semiconductors, pretty much seeing that within everything currently. So I like this one a lot. Now I will be adding some of these GDXW shares to the portfolio, wanting to add at least 10 of them to start with because that gives you a weekly dividend and you get the gold growth as well. Now that oil is basically going to be shorted down, we're going to start seeing a lot more inflow into these or into precious metals again. So I really like that. Sorry, I haven't had a chance to go over chat yet, so. Now, another one that I really like is the HPQ 29 calls. Have these on a watch list there for July 17th. They should still be, extremely cheap to take, but this is again HP Inc. So it's going to be following Dell, and Dell is absolutely going to start flying after this. So we have this very well formed cup here, and very likely those 29 strike calls would hit. Another one I'm looking at is Kuller, so KULR. Looking at the 4 straight calls. Now, currently in the pre-market, it is already at $4, so those 4 strike calls would be doing very, very well. But we're just looking for this to essentially travel back up to the upper Bollinger, which would be that 530, 550-ish range. Those are for July 17th, so those should do very nicely. Now for net, this is Cloudflare. This one I'm not so sure about. I mean, the price action I'm sure about, but the contract I'm not so sure about because we do have this very, very nice cup formed. Very likely we're seeing the handle form to the upside. However, the calls that I'm looking at are the June 18th 270 calls. I might try to extend that outward. Uh, but it's that 270 strike that I'm really looking at. Next one I'm looking at is Plug. So I want the 3 straight calls for July 17th. Basically the same ones I have on my main portfolio. This is looking very, very good on the daily time frame. We're at the lower Bollinger. We should be seeing some buying to the upside, which, currently in the pre-market, we're already close to that 2.9 range again. So we should definitely be seeing those take some weight. Now, the next one that I'm looking at is Real, so it's REAL. I'm looking to take the $10 puts on this. Um, Basically, there's just not great bullish structure here. There's a lot of bearish structure, and I do think that it can be coming down quite a bit. We're at the upper Bollinger, which is kind of my range to take the short in. So I'm looking for the 10 strike puts for July 17th. Market opens in 2 minutes, so we'll get to that in just a second. Now I'm looking at Rumble. Now Rumble's not all the way at the lower Bollinger, and potentially this could be an inverse cup formed here. So, um, kind of for bearish reasons, there's room to the upside right here to form a handle down to push downward, or to turn bullish and break out. So I like the $8 calls for July 17th. The pre-market's at 750, so um, the likelihood of those hitting are very, very high. I want the 42 strike puts on TGTX, basically like Target Therapeutics, whatever it's called, because it's overextended into the upper Bollinger, and we should be seeing it pull down towards that lower Bollinger. So I'm looking at the July 17th 42 strike puts on that. Now for SPAXU, I want the July 17th 35 strike puts. They're going to be a lot more expensive than what they currently are. Just give me 1 second because market's about to open. Now I want to look at the watch list really quick and see what's up so far. Okay, so I do want to get into GDXW. So we have a couple buys we need to do here, so just give me 1 second, everybody. Okay, so I took 10 shares of GDXW at the 43.95. It will be pulling down very slightly. I'm not worried about that in the moment. I do want to get a couple of these drip calls, so I'm only going to take 2. And these are the 5 straight calls for September. Okay, so those got filled at 0.82 per. Then I do want to take a couple of these plug calls for July 17th. So I'm only going to take two. Okay, got those filled at 0.32 per. Then I do want to be taking these July 17th SPAXU puts because I do see a lot of upside to the market. So I'm going to try to see if I can get one for 65. So I have an order on that, but it hasn't filled yet. Now, WTI, I do want to be taking some of these July 17th 4 puts on. I don't even see anybody selling any of them right now. And I definitely do want to add a few of these September 18th USO puts. So I'm going to try to get a limit order for, let's start it at 107 per. And we'll just have to climb that upward. Sorry I haven't had a chance to look at chat yet, everybody. Okay, so I did get the USO puts filled at 1.17 per. Which means I actually want to buy a second one of those as well. Okay, what else do I want? So the SPAXU puts are not filling yet at 65, so let's try 85. The sell is all the way up to the 285, so we might have to jump this up a little bit. So let's try 125. Now the reason why I want to short SPAXU here, and I did get it filled at 125, so that's great. The reason why I want to short SPAXU is because I am expecting the market to basically, buy all this weight up to the upside all the way back, and give me 1 second, but basically all the way back to the 760. Um, I'm expecting us to basically go to that 760 and then continue heading upward from there. So that's why I want to be shorting SPAXU, because those are basically like SPY calls. Now with that, I also want to be adding some SOXS 4-strike puts for July 17th. Now I know it's already at the 4-strike, but so let's see if we can get these filled at 0.77. Now I'm not focusing on day trades just yet because a lot of these orders I do need to get set up. Okay, so the SOXS puts we got filled at 0.83 per. Okay, great. Now, looking at the SPY here, obviously I don't want to buy calls into this yet. We do want to see this pull back a little bit before we try to engage on calls, and I don't want to be engaging puts into this because the market is, very, very likely going to be continuing upward this week. So not too, interested in taking puts on this, even though there is room to the downside. I'd rather just position the portfolio and stuff that I want to be positioned in. Now I am looking at the TQQQ 90 calls for July 17th, which on the daily time frame that'd be basically pulling um, slightly above the all-time high, but I think that's very much so where the market's trying to head right now. And these are still fairly cheap. They're 375 per, which does take a lot of capital. Um, but I do think the upside on it is, you know, pretty remarkable right now. So I'm gonna try to get one of these for 380. Okay, and that did get filled, so that's great. Okay, some people are finally starting to sell the WTI 4 puts, so I definitely want to add some of these. Currently, they are at about 70 per. So if I could take 2 of those, I'll have to move this order up to 0.75. And that should be great. Okay, so longing tech, longing semis, shorting oil, going long in precious metals, which I actually do want to look at silver here for a second before we jump into SPY or anything else. Silver, silver. Silver has been breaking down pretty hard, but I do still expect it to pull upward. So I want to look at some of the silver calls that are dated here. So 1 second. And we'll go over all my positions that I took in just a second here. So potentially silver could be going back up to the 80 strike. Okay. So looking out about a month, we see that we could try to target that 80 strike pretty cheap. It's like 44 or 0.44 per. But I think I'd rather target the 75 or 65 or 76 strike, excuse me. So we're gonna do just one contract at the 76 for July 17th. And we're gonna put that in for 0.68. See if it gets filled or not. Nope, we need to move that to 0.69. Okay, so I got that. So all the positions I have this morning on the new portfolio. I have GDXW, I have the July 17th TQQQ 90 strike calls, I have the September 18th 90 strike puts for USO, and that's for September 18th. I have the SOX S 4 strike puts for July 17th. I have the $5 drip calls for September 18th. I have the WTI 4 strike puts for July 17th. I have the SPAXU 35 puts for July 17th. I have the silver 76 strike calls for July 17th and the plug $3 calls for July 17th. So I'll type these all out, so just give me a second. So I'm gonna type everything out. Just give me a minute because it will take a minute. But yeah, with this portfolio, um, what I'm gonna be trying to do is use about $250 of it a day to day trade with, at least based on the current funds. If we do see some downside, then we will adjust accordingly. But with the 5,000, basically, we're going to be sitting around 250 to day trade with. Going to keep our risk very, very small here. Good morning, everybody, and sorry I haven't had a chance to really check chat too much yet. almost done typing this all out. Spexu. Okay, so that's everything I took so far this morning. Now the TQQQ call is doing very well. Everything else we are waiting on. Okay, and let's go back to the SPY. So for the SPY, we are waiting for a pullback. No, I'm not going to be shorting this pullback. I am going to be looking to go long to the upside after we do see, that little bit of pullback. Now, I do want to look at the other trades in this list really quick while I do have it open. Those CVS 95 strike puts look really, really good. So I do think I want to add one of these. The spread between them is currently fairly large, so I'm going to see if I can get it at 1.31. It's looking a lot closer to that 1.56, and I will type this position out too when I do eventually get it. There's a lot of orders on these, dang. So it's likely going to get filled at this 1.56. Okay, we did get that filled at 1.56. So let me go ahead and type that out. It's okay. If you're looking for the cheap contracts, we'll talk about that. There's some cheap contracts out there, so just give me 1 second and we can look at some of that stuff. 95 it for... Sorry, I want to type this out really quick. Okay, so we're very well positioned. And I actually do think I want to add two more of the drip positions just because we did have a little bit of a pull down. So I could get my average a little better. If it will let me, let's see here. Okay, so I got those filled at 0.75. So drip, and this is that same strike we took earlier. 5 calls for September 18th. 0.75 per. Total average is at, hold on, drip, drip, drip. And our average is now at 0.79. Okay, and we have times 4 of those contracts total. Now, SPAXU, I might add an additional put into, just because we are starting to get some more orders being filled on it, which means that I can get a cheaper price. So I'm going to be looking to add one more of these. Let's see if I can get it filled at the 1.15. Okay, cool. Got it filled at the 1.15. So let me type that out. And then we can go over some very, very cheap contracts in just a second here. And my average is now 0.25. Okay, so that's cool. That's looking great. Our drip position is now up. Okay, great. Okay, I want to look at some of these cheaper contracts. So, cheaper contracts. Let's see here. WTI, I want to look at the 3 strike puts for July. Just give me a second. I'm sorry, trying to scroll through everything while... So these 3 strike puts are super cheap right now, which I actually want to add like a whole mess of them. They're like $15 per. Um, just make sure that's for July 17th. Yeah, I want to add like 8 of those. Got those filled at, let's see, so let me type this out. 3 Ps, July 17th, 15 per. Which those should land very well. No, we're not down very much in any of the positions, basically just some of these positions with a larger spread between. Just waiting for some of the volume to pick up in those and we should be more than good to go. Okay, so I want to look back at the SPY here. We have still not had a pull down yet, which again, we're not going to be taking calls if we don't see that pull down. Now, we do have great structure in semiconductors right now, which means that there could be some really nice room in some of these SOXS puts expiring for this week. And again, I am expecting this week to be pretty bullish. So I'm just going to take a very small position in this. So I'm going to take two of the 4 strike puts for June 18th on SOXS, and I'll type that out. Got those filled at 0.25 per. There's that good pull down from semis, so I think we landed that perfectly. So SOXS, June 18th, 4Ps. So now we have dated options pretty much across the board. We're just waiting for some of the price action to kick in. Now, I'm not too worried about hedging these positions too much. Out of any of the positions I do want to hedge, it's the TQQQ July 17th call. But I do think we're going to push up quite a bit further before that's really ready to even engage into a hedge. I mean, potentially we could be hedging that 68 strike for that time frame. So let's check the puts here. Still an expensive hedge, but I think it's still worth taking. So I'm going to try to take this at 1.87. And again, with this hedge, I am pretty much expecting this to burn. It's basically just insurance in case the market does decide to push downward due to bad news or anything else. And we got that position filled at 1.93. I think 760 is definitely in the range. If not today, then over the next 2 sessions, most certainly. So this put got at 1.93 per for July 17th. One. Thank you for the gift, Jared. Okay, but I think we caught the dip on SOX super well. Now for SPY, again, I don't want to engage into this until we see a really, really opportune entry here. Again, we're only going to be committing about $250 to the day trading. So we want to make sure that our day trades are extremely ideal. So out of anything we're down on currently, it's just the WTI 3 puts, just because there's that spread between the 0.10 and the 0.15. We took 8 of those puts, so until that spread fills a little bit, we're going to be down, 20 bucks in that position. The CVS 90 puts down very, very slightly, but not very concerned. Our drip puts or our drip calls were down for the moment, but they are now doing fine. Now Spaxu is only about $1.60 away from being in the money. So once that heads a little closer to that, we should be seeing those Spaxu puts regaining considerable weight. So yeah, we're basically waiting on WTI, waiting on Spaxu, and waiting on USO. But those are all very dated positions. Not very worried about that. But I think we're positioned pretty well right now. Now, SPY looks like it wants to push back up again. If we can catch a dip, that'd be really nice. How big of a pullback am I looking for on the SPY? Um, just something reasonable to enter into puts. So basically, I'm looking for two different ranges. Either pulling back to that 20 mo, or if we're very, very lucky, pulling back to the lower Bollinger. Both of these are going to be, very nice call entries to the upside. Do I think we'll get either of these today? Not really. Um, we're kind of in a state of what's called a fair value gap. And just to describe this using the road analogies that I always love, is that this is where the market was before we had all of our bad news. Okay. Then all of a sudden we had all that bad news, which caused the market to, you know, adversely sell off. Okay. However, the bad news no longer exists, and because of that, what's very likely going to happen? We are very likely going to see this entire range bought up because the market wants to be trading up here, and it was trading up here. There was plenty of orders up here. They still have orders up at this range. Even with all the selling, they still have plenty of, weight up at this level. So, a fair value gap means that basically they should be buying this entire range. Um, we might not see a pullback. We might see a pullback. Not entirely sure yet. but we should be basically getting to that level of where the market was. Now, this is a super bullish thing because that means that all of this has just turned into liquidity to the upside, which means that with forming a handle, we're very, very, very likely going to be going to all-time highs within the next 2 weeks. And I mean like pushing well above this 760 range. This is the type of range where we could see the 775, 780. Seems absurd, but very much so within the table. So that's what I'm looking for. If we can claim some of that, that'd be very great. But I do want to be able to take some of that call upside um, on a smaller pullback. Yep, basically just waiting for WTI, USO, and SPAXI to do its thing. Not worried about the current positions though. Now, I usually don't like playing into Tesla too much. However, I do have Tesla on my watch list, specifically TSLL, which is the bull ETF, because there's this really, really large gap at the 418. Currently, we see Tesla at the 411. So what I'm looking for is those TSLL 17 straight calls for July 17th. So I do want to take one of them. Let's see if we can get it filled at 0.55. Probably needs to be closer to the 0.57. And I'll type that out in chat in just a second. Okay, so we did get that for 0.57. So this is TSLL. No, we're keeping those Starbucks calls. They should be doing very good. At least the July 17th ones are doing very, very well. I haven't checked Starbucks this morning, so unless that's down incredibly, then that could have changed, but okay. So that TSL or TSLL call looks super, super primed. So yeah, now we just wait. Um, One of the waits we are waiting on is trying to get into some SPY calls. I want to check the volatility today. It's at 90.86, so it's super, super low. It was at 89.96 this morning. Very likely going to pull back down and see that range. Would be really nice if we could pull down to the 20 mile on the 5-minute time frame, to be able to enter some calls to the upside. Because again, I do think our upside from here is, you know, pretty large, especially just on today. We have that 75, 70, or 755, 75, and that's, almost certainly going to be hitting today. After that range, we have the 78, 70, 758, 73. Sorry, I can't talk today. I don't know if that hits today, but if that doesn't hit today, then that's, you know, extremely likely to hit tomorrow. So when we do push down to this 5 mile range, I do want to look at the 754 calls, see if they are reasonably priced or not. Yeah, they're definitely reasonably priced. So we're going to be taking 2 of these, not yet, and we are going to start the entry with just 1. The reason why we're starting with 1 is because just in case we pull down that lower Bollinger, we want to be able to add an additional call, because again, our upside today is very, very large. So we want to be able to add into that if absolutely possible. So I will be looking for one of these positions, but I do want to see a pullback prior to entering. First target is going to be that 752.32 range. So if we can get that, that will be extremely ideal. The main position I'm down in right now is currently WTI and CVS, but I'm not really worried about either one of those. So just looking for our entry here on some of these SPY calls. Yeah, and CVS is looking very good to pull down to that downside very soon here. So I'm not worried about that one bit. So again, remember I will be adding one of the 754 calls once we hit this 20 mile range. Now the reason why I did so much buying this morning with dated contracts, this isn't something I'm going to be doing each and every day with this portfolio, but I did want to set up some of these positions because again, all these positions are dated for the most part. Um, and I saw plenty of room for them to, take those levels. Now I do want to take one of these real puts, which I will type out when I do actually get it filled, so give me 1 second. Because I do see tons of downside currently. Okay, so I'm going to type this out, but we are watching the SPY for our entry. Yeah, I can check NVIDIA. Let's see. We missed the best time to sell puts last Friday. Yes, absolutely cut them today. Those SMCI puts, absolutely cut them today. Yes, you should have taken profit on those last week. Um, Sorry if I did not put that out there. Let me type this put position out that I took. Reason why I'm taking the put on real is because it's super overextended. Yeah, you're very welcome. So the neutral catalyst is that essentially for Starbucks, and let me go ahead and pull it up. Ba, 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 is bullish structure. Okay. And I want to make sure I don't miss SPY here, so let me just... Okay, so I got that in my site. We entered at the lower Bollinger, and from the lower Bollinger, usually that creates very large buying to the upside. This one's a little bit of the exception, but it still did create buying to the upside. It was just a little extended outward. So that's kind of what we're expecting here. We're expecting major buying to occur from that bottom Bollinger, which so far it has. It was very shaky for a while. We did pull down all the way to that 92 something, which was a little terrifying. However, and big however, is that our upside target is very large. We're sitting in this is a daily time frame, so this cup has a ton of strength to it. So, seeing how the market's starting to try to grab that range, we should very likely hit that target. Um, very high confidence in hitting that target. So let's see if SPY can get our pullback here so we can enter. So we do have a little bit of an inverse cup. So should pull down from that handle and give us our level. And again, we're looking for the 752.44 range. Yeah, you could grab a higher strike if you want to. I'll try not to go above that 756, because I do think the 755, 75 can be hit today. So once we do take our calls, that 756 I think is, excuse me, very reasonable. Now, the main reason why I'm down in basically these contracts that I've taken is just the larger um, spreads between some of these contracts. So until the contract price catches up a little bit further, then the spread is going to be kind of wonky, which can definitely make it look a lot worse than what it is. But I have super, super high conviction in every single trade that I've entered today. If we could just get our pull down in the SPY, that would be great. I think it's forming that handle on that cup currently, so we should be getting our level. Now I want to check gold and I want to check. Excuse me, I can't stop yawning today, jeez. I want to check HPQ, which means that I want to check Dell. Not too remarkable yet. There's very likely that inverse cup forming. Now for WTI, it hit this very important 3.4 range. However, we are targeting underneath that. Okay. If the inverse cup completes, won't we have a head and shoulders? Very likely, but let me just double check. Yeah, I mean, basically we do have that smaller head and shoulders liquidity, which that's perfectly fine. Um, Even though the structure is bearish, this doesn't mean it's going to be a bearish day. Um, they do have to shake positions out one way or another. So we will use this bearish structure to be able to enter our calls to the upside. Because again, we still have this major gap to complete here. So I'm not too worried about that bearish structure like, tearing us down for the rest of the day. It's very likely bearish structure, pull down, build bullish structure, head back up. Yep, it definitely can lead into chop. However, I do think that the ultimate goal of the day will be to close this upside. So whether they chop us at this 20 mo, whether they pull down to the lower Bollinger and then chop us, um, the upside target is still going to be very viable. And you don't have to worry about theta too much because once we do pull towards the strike, um, it should be doing absolutely fine. This is if they're going to actually give us our downside. Because potentially this can just form into a bullish cup to the upside, so we'll see if that happens. Good morning, Eric. So I posted all the positions earlier. Um, I don't know if anyone wants to do me a favor and copy and paste all those. That would be super, super helpful. But they are above in chat, and that's currently what we're waiting for, is for some of these positions to start taking off. Now, if we don't get the SPY calls here, I'm not going to be, the most worried in the world because we did take some of the weekly Success 4 puts, and this is about to run into the money very, very shortly. So, um, looking for that. But we have a lot of different plays going on currently. Now, those American airline calls that we took last week are up a boatload. Potentially still a good entry on them as well, now that we have pulled down a little bit today. That is tempting to add some of these to this portfolio. You know what, I think I'm gonna add one of those. But I want to see if they have a 1650. Now that we've kind of missed the run a little bit. Nope, they only have the 16 strike for July 17th. Let's see if we can get in at 0.63. Try 0.64. Okay. So I'll type that position out. You could just post them here in the stream chat again, which will be a little annoying. I do apologize because you're basically gonna have to go symbol by symbol. So hold on, let me tell you the American Airline 16 call July 17th, 0.64 times 1. So just added that. Now we are looking for a pull down in SPY here, so it's looking very likely we're going to get it. But yeah, we have a lot of different trades going on right now. Currently the main ones we're down in is CVS and WTI. The WTI puts, again, I'm not concerned about in the slightest. It's mainly just the spread between the three strike puts that we took, where there's the bid at the 0.10 and the sells at the 0.15. So basically it's telling you that you're losing, almost $5 a contract. Even though that's not really true because you can't get those filled out the 0.10. Now, if we don't get our entry here on SPY, I'm not going to try to chase something and go for it. Again, I'd rather just be very, very cautious And we do already have, bullish calls targeting SPY or, tech upside. Between the SOX puts, the SPAXU puts, the TQQQ calls, we have a lot of different positions already working on that upside, so I'm not too concerned right now. But basically now we wait. We wait for some of our trades to start working out or not. Now we are seeing semiconductors pull down a little bit. There was a little bit of convincing bearish structure in here, but this is actually starting to look pretty bullish. So I do think that's going to swing to the upside pretty hard. Which is good for our SOX S puts. QQQ forming a small cup right here. So that's going to do very well for our TQQQ calls. Sorry, kind of a mess going on here. Let's clean this up a little bit. But we essentially have the same ordeal going, where we do have this cup top that needs to be closed. Now potentially there's a smaller cup top right here, which I do want to mark out. And that's at the 743.68. So we can basically pull to that level. That arrow doesn't want to work on me. Pull to that level and then form some form of rejection to build a handle, then continue upward. But again, our TQQQ call is all the way for, July 17th. So we have a full month to allow this bullish price action to do its work. And we do have the downside hedged on TQQ as well. So again, we do have those 68 puts for July 17th as well. So if we can get a good entry on SPY, which is starting to look like this is forming a smaller head and shoulders here, that would be very ideal. Our entry would be around that 752, 51 range, give or take. So basically in that range right there. So we'll see if we can get that. Lower Bollinger has been pulling up pretty aggressively. So potentially they can push us all the way down to the lower Bollinger, and that can create a very nice entry as well. So again, I am looking at the SPY 754 calls, wherever I added that to the watch list. Need to re-add it because I'm not seeing it. But basically, I'm going to be saving the funds for roughly two of these calls. And again, how we're going to trade this is that first call we'll take at that lower 20 mile range. And if we push down all the way to the lower Bollinger, then I will aim to add to that call at that level. But basically saving the funds for those two calls. Thank you, Scott, so much. I appreciate you typing it all. Helps immensely. Thank you, TA. I appreciate that. So I want to look at oil prices here. Not going to really be able to pull it on screen because I do want to watch the SPY. But let's see what's going on with oil. So it was pulling back up towards that 19 something range. Now it's pulling back down again. So it's towards that 1931. So now it's at the 1923. Really am expecting it to continue downward, especially towards that 1896. That's a very, very solid gap for that to take. And from that level, I'm going to mark out some of these ranges that we are looking for. So we have a lot of downside below us. Again, we have the 90 strike puts, which they should do just fine because again, trading in standard conditions, usually we're going to be trading between this 61 to basically like what the 83, yeah, that 83, 84 range. So these 90 strike puts should land very, very well. And again, we have them all the way out to September. Um, so just be very patient. Don't worry about whether that position's up or down. Um, if this conflict's ending like everybody says it is, then those are going to do very well. Mainly the trade I'm down on the most right now is still that WTI and the CVS, which for CVS I'm not worried about. It did pull back up towards that $100 range, but it has been pulling down. Hold on, let me open this up really quick. But it has been pulling down ever since. Yeah, so it pulled to the 101 or the 102.77. Or no, that was last trading session, excuse me. It pulled to the 101.14 today, creating an inverse cup at the 98.68. So we should be seeing continued downside in CVS. And we have many, many, many gaps on this to close. So plenty of downside. I'm not worried about that contract. They should be doing absolutely fine very soon here. Then for WTI, we just need the strike to hit closer to our contracts because until then the spread's going to be really thrown off. And with the spread being thrown off, it's going to make it look like the position's negative when it's really not. Now, if we can get our SPY downside here, we will be looking to take some calls. See semis pulling down a little bit. I think they hit the top of their gap though as well. Which means that potentially they can be forming, well, they have formed this cup. Sorry, I got a lot of drawings on this screen. I'll have to clean it up a little bit. But they can form a handle to pull to the upside further. So regardless, I'm not really worried about our positions. If anything, we'll just lightly add to them if we do see that handle forming. So yeah, potentially that can happen. Please look at Adobe when you get a chance. Oh yeah, I was asked about NVIDIA as well. Adobe. I actually had Adobe on my list to take some contracts into. Now, it looks super good, and the reason why it looks super good is daily time frame, lower Bollinger. That is pretty much the time to be buying. Give me 1 second, everybody. But yeah, for Adobe, the upside's like massive right now. Don't really have too much of a downside gap either. The thing is that, and this was kind of the one thing really pushing me away from it, even though it's still okay because this is the bottom of a major bearish structure. But we have this head and shoulders formed, and from the head and shoulders, and this is the weekly time frame, so this holds a lot of weight. Hold on 1 second. Sorry, my daughter ran into the room. Um, from the bottom of this weekly head and shoulders, or double top, excuse me, this creates a range where there can be some very large buying to the upside, because from the bottom of that structure, again, that is a double top, but a double top is also an inverse cup. So with this being a very large inverse cup, we expect some upside before continued downside, if there's going to be continued downside. So that creates very, very bullish conditions, even though the symbol overall doesn't look very solid right now. Now I want to go over NVIDIA really quick and then I gotta help my daughter with something. We had the bottom of this inverse cup, and with that, that creates bullish conditions. Now the thing with NVIDIA here, and I do apologize for all the drawings, and I want to make sure we're not missing our SPY entry, is that this can create a bit of a head and shoulders. Okay, so if NVIDIA is going to turn bearish, this is building the structure to do so. But I don't really think that's the case. I think more so with it being at that lower Bollinger, that's creating the conditions for it to head to the upside and to fill some of this, um, structure that it's been building. And another really, really key thing is that it bounced off of the top of this major consolidation channel, which is sat in that channel for, an extremely, extremely long period of time. Um, this bounce right here is very, very, very bullish because that means that they are rejecting this downside. Okay, if they're rejecting the downside, then where are they trying to go? Very likely upward. So that's looking very positive so far. Anyway, I will be right back in just like 2 or 3 minutes. Alright, sorry about that. Let me go ahead and look at SMCI. Should be heading upward since we exited those puts last week. Yeah, it's doing very nice. I remember when we took these puts at the top, so many people were giving me flack about that, saying, oh no, those puts aren't gonna land. Well, they landed it super, super hard. Um, anyway, with that said, you can ignore some of these older channels, those don't matter. And I want to delete that. Want to delete that. So the thing about SMCI is that either this is trying to form basically a cup right here. Might help if I have the drawing tool out. A cup right here to that first range before finishing this larger cup. If that's the case, then this can absolutely be that handle to push us upward into that deeper cup. So do I think there's a large possibility to pull back up to that, 52, 62-ish range? Yeah, absolutely. You just have to be very careful with the contracts because SMCI can get very pricey very quickly. So just be careful. Um, but I do want to look at some of those contracts here. And I think I would look at July. So a lot of these are actually fairly cheap in terms of the pricing. So even just targeting this upper Bollinger here at the 52, that's going to cost you basically like $25 per, the 0.25, which that's super reasonable. We took our 38 puts back when it was up at that 52 range, and the 32 puts at that point were, geez, I don't remember, 30 something, 40 something dollars per. And those suckers ran all the way into, multiple hundreds. So is there room to the upside? Yeah, absolutely. Um, is it worth targeting? Yeah, I think so. I think it is worth targeting. Kind of like those 45 calls for July 17th. The reason why I want the 45 is because it's between the 20 mile and the upper Bollinger. So if we are going to get the push to the 20 mile, then these will start to profit. Getting a push to the upper Bollinger, these will run, in the money by about $7. So for, basically like $41 a pop, yeah, I'm filling those at 41 per. Um, that's giving us, potentially a huge, huge, huge upside. Now, USO has been moving back up again. Which I do think we should hedge for, even with all of our oil shorts going. So I have positions for September. These upside positions are actually super expensive, so I don't like that. I'll just have to monitor that in another way. So yeah, I grabbed a couple of those 45 calls for SMCI. Uh, those calls were 0.41 per. And I like them a lot. So now, unfortunately, here with SPY, we were not able to pick up any of the calls, which again, I'm entirely okay with. QQQ is going to hit this 742 any second now. And I don't want to chase any positions here with the day trading because again, remember, With this portfolio, I'm only going to be allotting roughly $250 per day to day trading until it gets to about $10,000. Then I'll bump that up to 500. Um, I want to keep it being basically about that 5% of the portfolio at maximum. Um, so with that said, there's no reason to chase. It's better to just wait until we find something, um, super, super, super ideal. And from that, we can then take positions. Just waiting for oil to pull back down again, and majority of my positions will be in the green. Again, a very high conviction in pretty much everything we've taken today, so I'm not very worried about it being down or not. Now, again, a big reason why I'm still, convicted in this CVS short is because we did push into the upper Bollinger, had the upper Bollinger day two, and from that day two, we should start seeing that downward consolidation. So, with this being all the way to July 17th, 95 strike put, it should, you know, run well into the money. So yeah, I'm pretty happily positioned right now. Just kind of waiting for everything to do its thing. Did my stream cut out? Hold on, let me type out the SMCI. Yeah, that's the same way I feel, Riker. I don't want to enter on the upper Bollinger. There's no reason to chase it. We didn't get down to the 20 mile, and because of that, um, it just wasn't a trade that I want to chase into. Yeah, I mean, there's so many different opportunities to make really good money. There's no reason to chase into anything at this point. If there's a good setup, we'll try to target it. If not, then we're just going to be patient and wait. And the big reason why I'm not shorting today, the ADL is just absolutely blaring. That's just, telling us pretty much verbatim that there's a lot of money entering the SPY right now. So there's really not a whole lot of, room to short that, which is why I'm not going to be shorting this upper Bollinger on this portfolio. seeing a bounce out of semis, so our SOXS puts should be doing very well soon. Again, we do have the 4 strike puts, so those are going to be running in the money any moment now. WTI, I'm just waiting for this to pull back down with oil, which oil for some reason is a little elevated, but not too concerned about that. It's very likely just trying to form some liquidity. TQQQ doing very well. About to push into the high of the day. From this we have a small cup, form a handle to continue upward. Very likely going to see that within QQQ as well. Yep. So very likely going to see a slight pull down out of SPY, tech, semis to form these handles on these cups, which you can short. I'm not going to, but there's the potential to short those. I'm just not going to be doing that with this portfolio. Now it says I'm down about $127, which sure, whatever. But a lot of that's because of the large spreads in between some of these contracts, and mainly the CVS contract, which again I still have a ton of conviction that that's going to run, well into the money. So down currently, but not really worried about any of the positions. USO is spiking. Is that concerning for the SPY? A little bit. It really depends on why it's spiking. Um, is this spiking out of news, which I haven't been able to check? Um, or is this spiking just because of liquidity sake? For example, we do have this very large inverse cup formed, which yes, this handle is kind of pushing past that, but that's likely trying to form a handle to the downside, or potentially a small cup here and forming a handle from that. So we'll see. Um, I don't really expect this to continuing or to continue traveling upward throughout the rest of the day. If the deal with Iran and everything is going to be going through, then we will be seeing oil prices get defeated. Let me say bye to my daughter really quick. Sorry about that, I'm back. So let's check the SPY. Just tapering here. The cup has been formed, so I do again expect a pull down to form the handle. Now, the cool part about that is yes, we didn't get our entry earlier, but we could still be getting a really solid entry in here. Because again, it does look like the market wants to push towards this 755, 75. So if this cup decides to form a handle, then very likely it's going to strike that 20 MA. From that 20 MA, that'd be a really nice entry into the upside. And we'd very likely have to target the 755 calls instead, depending on the price of the 754s. So yeah, that's likely what I'll be doing. Something like that. Which I know I'm not the best artist, but you understand the concept. Now Tesla still looks fine here, very likely forming a handle. Looks terrible, but I do expect it to head back upward. So we'll see if we can get our 20 MA here. No, GDXW down very, very slightly, but barely any at all. And that does give us a weekly dividend. The last dividend wasn't so great, but that's because, obviously gold prices have been getting absolutely hammered over the last couple weeks. But I am expecting the next couple dividends to start picking up weight again. No, I'm not. I'm not in a SPY call yet. Yeah, you should definitely take profit on some of those 755s if you're up 700%. Yeah, I'm just waiting for the SPY entry right now as well. Um, Waiting for the handle downward towards that 20 mil on the 5-minute time frame. Once we get to that, that should be a really, really nice position to the upside. Any thoughts on Oklo or USR? So Oklo I've been looking at. We actually did have a really, really nice position on Oklo a couple weeks ago. If I can find it, Oklo. So Oklo currently doesn't look super great. Um, Basically really worried about that range right there. There's a little bit of liquidity built in there. But you have major bearish structure, which this can be an inverse cup, head and shoulders. For me, I'm seeing it as the inverse cup because we did hit that liquidity range. And from that inverse cup, very likely forming a handle to the downside. So I do have, massive, massive concerns about that. And the thing about nuclear energy is that, 100% it's the future. It's what everybody should be swapping to. But it usually takes, a minimum of about 8 to 12 years for each reactor to pull into the profit. So it's a very long-term hold. And in terms of the equities standpoint, I don't know what Oklo has for, running reactors, if they're just setting them up. I have no clue about that, and I haven't had time to research that. So that's something that I would look into is does Oklo have running reactors in the profit? If yes, then potentially this could be a really nice upside. If not, then, you know, this inverse cup and handle is very likely going to take us down pretty deep here. I'm still in the open 6 calls, yes. And yes, usually I do take puts at the upper Bollinger. It's just for this portfolio, I'm not going to be doing that just because today is a very bullish day. Um, but correct, this is, you know, put entry range. And those puts should take us to the 20 mil. However, I'm just not doing that because I'm only going to be expending about $250 a day for day trades. So I want to try to make sure that they're, you know, as pristine as possible. Not that the put doesn't have room. Um, I just don't want to deal with potential chop because, for example, and we've seen this on cup handles before, where they barely pull down at all, form that smaller bullish cup, and then it's off to the races again. I don't want to deal with that with the put contract on this portfolio. Yeah, you're very welcome. So I'm basically waiting for all my oil stuff to pick up. So drip, WTI, USO, waiting for all that. Our American airline calls are absolutely blasting right now. Even the calls I took today are up, 22%. Waiting on plug a little bit, but I'm not too concerned about that either. I think those contracts should land very well. And mainly it's the CVS contract that's given me some trouble. Um, Down 23% in that contract. But I still have very high conviction in it, so I'm not too concerned even if it is, currently pulling my P&L down in the, you know, moment. Now, once we do get this upside in SPY, our SPAXU puts should be picking up a lot of weight. Now, my SOXS puts are starting to do pretty good, but it's just right at the beginning, so there's still plenty of room on those to, run their course. TQQQ calls up almost 12%. So yeah, just waiting for oil to pull down basically. Oh no, I usually don't have time to watch a whole lot of anything. Um, Besides the market, you know. Um, Between the market and taking care of my daughter, that's kind of my life. I mean, I couldn't even tell you a single team that's playing in the World Cup or anything right now. CVS having some decent inflow today. However, I still expect you to pull down. Semi is looking very good, so invalidated that potential inverse cup. And now it's looking like they want to run back up to the 627.47. QQQ getting very close to our 743.68 target. USO 2 DTE 107 puts. And yes, you should sell those elf calls. They should be up massively. Massively, massively, massively. So let me look at USO. Hold on. No, I wouldn't take those 2DT puts on those. Um, I mean, the potential target would be this 110 if we get that within the next few sessions. But I think that's just too soon, too short of a duration to really gain the growth that you need to off those contracts. So I want to look at plug. So kind of what we're expecting on plug here is this major cup and handle. So we are kind of looking for that support buying to start with the $3 calls. You know, these would pull these calls basically a whole $1.50 into the money, which for plug that'd be, you know, massively, massively profitable. Really, really tempted to take these HPQ 29 calls. But we do already have a lot of tech going. So a little hesitant on that. Hig has been doing super good today. Now, once we do get up to that 755, 75, potentially that can give you the range to short this. However, we have to be very, very concerned because there's that liquidity range right there, which means that they can kind of just blast through that. Um, you know, and that only be an additional $3 upside, which might seem like a lot, but that's really not a lot. But I kind of do like taking the short position at that 755, 75. Um, that is targeting this lower liquidity range right in there, which there's a ton of liquidity built there. So that would give us, you know, fairly decent short to the downside. So I think potentially that could be a really solid trade. So we might look for something like that. With that said, we would be targeting the 754 puts or the 753. Um, they both should serve their purpose. But those would be fairly cheap at that point. So if we pull up to that range and we start seeing some bearishness, then I think absolutely. The HPQ I'd want for July 17th. SPY has a gap at the 757. Is it that 757.65? You see, this is what I was worried about if, people took puts at this range. With today being so bullish, it's very, very hard to short into this. So, again, I'm being super patient with my positions with the day trades. I don't know, I'm not seeing it. I see the 758, but maybe I'm stupid. Yeah, we could toss those 4.5 calls at that point. Just take the 3 calls. Oh, he almost nailed that 755.50. Just reload the stream. Sorry if there's outage issues. It's not showing anything on my side. Hey Kat, how's it going? We're entered into a bunch of different positions, just kind of waiting for them to start moving. Not fully over. It needs to be completely signed. It needs to be set in stone at this point before we can get too excited about it. It's looking like it's over, but I don't think it gets signed until the 19th if I remember correctly. Yeah, even just now, Iran foreign minister said that the first round of negotiations would be held after signing a memorandum of understanding between the Iran and USA. Um, Basically, since the USA has you know been very distrustful with some of our stuff and breaches of past commitments and blah blah blah. So not fully done yet, but it's looking like it. No, not yet, but I will. I'm not concerned about that. It was more so just upsetting because of, you know, not seeing that price action occurring, which I need to steal Jeffrey's indicator eventually, but I didn't see that move coming at all, and so it just completely blindsided me, and it was more just an emotional thing rather than worrying about the money so much. I mean, granted, losing money absolutely sucks and I hate to do it. I'd prefer not to lose, $1,200 because of a tweet, but it's not the end of the world. We can always recover funds that are lost. Yes, the opportunity to sell those were basically for last week. Sorry I did not post about that. Um, Last week was just very, very busy week. But yes, definitely get out of those repel puts or reply or whatever we're gonna call it. Repel. I don't know. Semi is doing very well right now. And our Success puts are going to be running into the money any second now. So that's cool. So let's see. US Iran MOU. I don't know what that stands for. I think that's some sort of memorandum. Hold on. So there has been a signing of a MOU with Iran between the United States. Um, I'll have to find what MOU stands for. I'm assuming that's the memorandum. So the MOU provides for immediate Hormuz opening. Hormuz opening takes a little bit of time. U.S. officials anticipate rise in Hormuz flows within the next 1 to 2 weeks. Agreement ensures prompt reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and removal of U.S. sanctions on Iran. A high-level U.S. official announced a significant rise in traffic in the Strait of Hormuz starting now. Well, we could actually check that ourselves. So let's look at the live traffic. Okay, let's see. And we do see plenty of tankers going through. But I still think they're all... So we're starting to see tankers go through the strait right now. They're not in the strait just yet, but they were positioned in port, and now we're seeing a lot of them starting to move, um, towards the strait and then making channels towards it. So that's a positive thing. But still, a lot of boats are just sitting at port right now. Okay, memorandum of understanding. Okay. Thank you for that. Cool, so that's a good thing. That's really good news. So again, at this 755.75, I am going to take a put, which I don't have it watch listed, so I'm going to miss the opportunity. What did we hit? We had 755.67. So I'm looking for the 755.75. I'll see if we hit that or not. But I am going to take just a single one of the 754 puts when we do hit that level. Again, I'm keeping my trades very, very small on this portfolio. Again, I only want to commit about $250 tops per day for the day trades. VVIX did pull down from the 91 and it's currently at the 90.93, which is bullish, but we are expecting an uptick if we are going to be expecting selling. Now I am waiting for the VVIX to have a slight uptick before I enter this put, because either I'm going to enter the put at the 755.75 and then basically watch for stop loss at that 756 range in case we, continue heading upward. Or I'm going to wait on the put and allow volatility to tick back up. And we are not at the upper Bollinger just yet. The upper Bollinger is at the 755.96, which is telling us we do still have some upside to contend with. And the VVIX did pull down very, very slightly, which is still telling us that very likely we will be pushing into the upper Bollinger prior to pulling down. So I'm going to be very patient here. Upper Bollinger again is at that 755.95. So unless I see volatility tick upwards, then I'm just going to be very patient for that range. Upper Bollinger hit. Now before I engage these puts, I really want to see an uptick in the volatility to really signal that, yes, we're going to be able to start heading down. Volatility still pulling downward, so we're not entering the put just yet. Okay, volatility ticked upward. Went ahead and grabbed my put. And again, this is the 754 put. I opened it at 0.41. Now I am going to set a market conditional order for slightly above this 5 mile, or the 20 mile, excuse me. So 20 miles at the 754.38. I want to sell this at 754. Let's do 55. Completely fine with, you know what, 57. Completely fine with that. So if the price of SPY drops below the 740, I can't talk, 754, 57, then the market will automatically sell this order or sell this put. Primarily down within DRIP and WTI, but again, those are largely the spreads. Down slightly in plug, but the biggest position is this CVS 95 put. But I'm going to hold on to that for a few days because I do see the potential downside. Volatility has dropped back down very slightly, so we can continue heading upward, and if we continue seeing volatility dropping down, then I'll just go ahead and exit the put. I just got a single contract. And the difference between DEX and GEX is one is targeting delta, the other is targeting gamma. So there's a very, very large difference between delta and gamma. Delta is basically the worth in terms of the actual equity movement for the option. The gamma is basically, it's not the same as IV, but it's where the contracts are really starting to build a lot of interest towards in terms of the strike. So two different things. Uh, the gamma is the one you kind of want to be looking at because that's the one where if there's, say, a lot of downside gamma, then the market makers and dealers will very, very likely be trying to target that range. Whereas delta is just kind of showing you where the money is currently located, which that can shift very quickly. So we're gonna mark our entry. Even though this is really cool, this little thing on the side, it shows the actual position. But we basically entered right in that range. And what we're targeting is the 754.57. And we might move that stop or the market conditional order up slightly. But so far I want to keep it at that 754.57. But I do think that very likely I'll have to readjust that. And the reason why I only got the single put is because if I want to, you know, the goal is that I'm going to be keeping the day trades within about that $250 range for this portfolio size. Now, I want to be able to add to positions if possible, navigate positions, in different ways if possible. So, I'm not going very heavy into any positions. Volatility is at the 90-94, so not exactly telling us that it's, you know, turning into selling just yet. Now, if we do start getting the selling to the downside, I will add an additional put just to, grab onto that extra range. But I do want to see some selling signals first. So far, we're not seeing any. This could potentially be forming a cup and handle to the upside too, so we could be pushing up even further. The thing is, it doesn't matter if it's all-time highs or not. Um, Machines are always going to be buying. It doesn't matter if it's, you know, the SPY's at 800, whatever, right? Um, Machines are still going to keep buying if there's gamma to the upside. Now, volatility is starting to pick up a little bit, but again, I want to see it coincide with the actual price action here. And we are going to move our order up to 740, excuse me, 754.77. And this could be that smaller cup and handle breaking out. We are starting to see the VVIX slowly climb upward though. It's at 90.99. Volatility dropping down slightly, so at 90.95. Back up to 90.98. Now let's see what's going on with semis here. Semis look very much like they want to reach the top of that cup. Volatility is still pulling down, so at the 90.91. It was at 90.99 just a few seconds ago, so that of course does work against the puts. Gonna add one more put here. And these market conditional orders, I'm going to move up to the 754.91. Alright, but I'll be right back in just a couple minutes. I want to get some coffee, everybody. So I'm gonna write a note really quick that I am away getting coffee really quick. Time is it? It's 12:07, so let's say at 12, I don't know, let's say 12:15 latest. Now, if we do continue heading upward while I'm getting coffee, then I will be cutting these puts So if you see the puts being cut, just pay attention to the side right here because that will tell you. So I will be right back in just a few minutes, everybody. And yes, I did. I entered the second SPY put. Let me go ahead and mark that entry. But I am in two sets of puts currently. Well, two of the 754 puts. So, okay, I will be right back, everybody. Like 5 minutes. Sorry, I kind of spilled coffee all over my counter, so it took a little longer. Okay, so I have moved the conditional order up on the puts to the 755.01, but I'm going to change that to the 755.13 just because I really don't care about the downside today. I just want to be able to profit off these puts. So we're going to, smack that range and, be on our merry way basically. So the main position in the portfolio that's really pulling it down is this CVS put. That's because CVS has ran from the 98 all the way to the 101, but I still have very high conviction in that put regardless, so I'm okay with that position being down currently. Not wanting to stop it out or anything else just yet. Now, on the 1 minute structure, we are starting to slowly close this inverse cup, which can definitely bring us some downside. Not really expecting a whole lot of downside. Again, I am bullish on the day. Ideally, I wanted calls, but I missed my entry down here. I was waiting for it to push into the 20-ma. That did not happen, and because of that, missed those calls. Just looking to take small scalp on these puts. However, we're seeing volatility pull down quite hard currently. It did pull down all the way to the 90.45. With this cup, this inverse cup being closed here, we can expect a small handle to the upside before continuing downward to our level. So no, I'm not cutting the puts or anything just yet. But I also want to start looking at the 578 calls to the upside. So I think I'm going to take one as a hedge at this range regardless. And we'll just add to it when we push further down on the day. If we get our push down. Either we're going to get our push down to our level, or we're just going to continue pushing up to that upward gap. So have that hedged with a call, have the puts going, ready to go one way or another. But in total, I've spent 109 on the 0DT positions for today. So it's pretty much all I'm looking to spend, unless we do pull down where I can add additional calls, but 755.19. That'd be ideal because that would give us a good exit on our put positions. And again, this can be that inverse cup and handle, or it could just turn into a bullish cup. So that's what we're watching for very closely right now. Let's see what semiconductors are doing. Yeah, they're so close to closing this cup to the 627.47. Let me check the price of open. Yeah, I'd go ahead and sell those. You do have a cup and handle, you do have bullish structure, but hitting another $1.40 to the upside within the next 3 sessions is going to be pretty difficult. Volatility is at 90.39. If we don't reject soon, then this will turn into a bullish cup rather than that inverse head and shoulders, or that inverse cup and handle, excuse me. The ADL is still very strong though. We're seeing volatility pull down. Excuse me. Not a lot of signals that we're heading to the downside so much. Now, if we do form this cup to the upside, I do think I want to cut one of the puts just to reduce how much we're going to be losing as we climb upward. Because we do want our call to ideally gain weight over the puts in terms of losses and everything. So not doing that yet, but if we do close that cup, I will be. But if we do reject downward and we do get our downside, that would be super ideal because we'd be able to exit our puts and additionally be able to take additional call entries into the upside of the day. So would be ideal if they could give us a 20 mile retest here. 20 mile has been pulling up very aggressively though. It's at the 755.41. So let's see where we got our orders at. We have ours at the 755.21. We're gonna need to adjust that to 755, probably 57. Now if we hit the 756.67 here, again I will be closing one of those puts and just be within a single put, single call, wait for the call or the put to pay out, and try to enter additional calls to that upside. Volatility is pushing pretty low. It's at 90.11. Just for context, it was at that 90, 99, 90, 90 range when we were back in here with our first orders. I'm in the 754 puts. Can actually see on the screen because Webull has this widget where it's showing. Okay, and we're gonna go ahead and exit one of the puts here. Because there is a real potential that we could just continue pushing for the rest of the day. And I'd rather take a small loss than a large loss. So we now have the one put against the call. If the call's going to head to the upside, then it will profit out basically everything we've lost on those puts. Yeah, we're very close positioned, Pat. I I have the 758 call, but I have a 754 put instead. Yeah, I'm thinking that too, but I'm being careful. Really don't want to overexpose to the put side if we don't get the downside we're looking for. Now, if we could get our downside, that'd be really great. But so far, not seeing a lot of signals telling us that we're going to. Volatility's at 90.06, so that's just been continuously pulling down on the day. Our HIG is probably, yep, still buying upward. So the thing is about this chop here, while it is starting to build some bullish structure, from this chop, it's been expanding the upper Bollinger pretty heavily, which means that with that cup and handle, I do want to take an additional SPY call. Especially when we've been seeing volatility just continuing to drop. It's dropped very hard actually. It's at 89.57. So went ahead, added to my calls. But I only added a single position, so I have the two 758 calls and the one 754 put. Now for the calls, I am setting a market conditional order for the 758.61. So either we get our push to the downside and the puts get filled or closed out, or we get our push to the upside and the calls get closed out. Or they can just chop us between the ranges and, you know, burn both sides, but we'll see about that. But with volatility pulling down as hard as it is, it's looking very promising to head to the upside very soon here. And if we do get our downside, then I'll add just a single additional call to the upside to bring it to 3 calls. Exit the puts and then, you know, be on our way. So the put downside market conditional order, I have it set to 755. Gonna have to change this to 755.67. And then the upside market conditional order is at the 758.31. Even though we have room to push all the way to that 758.70 range, but I just want to be able to secure some profit if we're going to, start heading up to that range. Okay, so the puts are finally gaining some weight here. Not a whole lot, I'm still down technically. But if we could get to that 20 mile, that'd be very ideal. That'd be a great exit and a really, really good entry. PVIX is still pulling down, so 89.44, which is telling me very likely this is not going to hold very long. So if we don't push down here in like the next 2 minutes, then I'm just going to exit the put. Because so far volatility is telling us that they do not want down. I'm going to set my stop to the 755.81. Should hit here any second. There you go. Now I'm going to add just a single additional call here, just because we are close to this 20 mile range. Alright, now our calls are doing very well. So hopefully that was the liquidity needed to take them upward. Volatility still at the 89.43. All right, everybody, I'm starting to fall asleep in my chair, so if there's any final questions of the day, now's a great time. But I will not be taking any additional trades on the day other than exiting these calls. My call exit is set up at the, let me get an actual horizontal ray because I have it at the 31. So this is my call exit. Planned call exit anyway. Let me make that text not so small. Okay, and that's kind of what I'm looking for the rest of the day, is riding these cups upward, completing this cup to the upside, which again, we have a very large cup forming to this 758.73. We're seeing volatility pulling downward. So it's very likely that we will be hitting that level. Hopefully sooner rather than later today. I'd prefer not to be trading all the way up to the last second to get these contracts to print. But I don't think that'll be the case. I do think that we will try to fill a large majority of this gap prior to that. So I know, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to yawn. Oh, I know you are, but it's so true. It's so true though. Yawning is very contagious. Yeah, mainly the portfolio's down today because of the CVS call. It's lost $60, which isn't great, but I do expect it to pull back. It has plenty of time on it, so has all the way till July 17th. Now this would be a really good call entry, but I'm not going to continue adding calls. If these calls are going to print today, then they're going to print. Um, if not, then I'll find an exit on them. All right, everybody, if there's no final questions, of the day, then I'm gonna go ahead and end the stream here. I appreciate you all taking the time to watch me trade. Um, I will be live tomorrow at 9:15, and we will be doing our class again tomorrow and Wednesday at 5 or at 8 p.m. Uh, Eastern Standard Time. So those of you who are, members, I look forward to seeing you in those classes. But other than that, I'm just going to be waiting for these calls um, to either, do well or basically blow up. That's the rest of the day for me. Again, I'm not going to be taking any trades on this portfolio unless they're on the stream. Um, Everything on this portfolio will be streamed. So, um, yeah, you're very welcome, everybody. Um, I hope to see you all tomorrow morning, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day. I think we entered some very, very quality positions today, and we did it very cheaply too. Um, so I'm very thrilled about that. We entered plenty of very, 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 very solid positions, and we still have basically 2,200 in cash um, to use. So everything will work out very well. But yeah, take care, everybody. Have a great day. Hopefully, the rest of your trades go well today, and we will catch up tomorrow. So, have a good one.